Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Women in Math and STEM, where our mission is to reach out to as many professionals, aspiring professionals, students, whatever you name it. We try to reach out to them, who essentially support the initiative of bringing more women and young girls into the STEM field. So, with that being said, as always, feel free to open up the description or transcript to better follow along, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, and thank you so much for coming today to this podcast, this episode, and talking with me. Just to sort of start off, do you guys mind introducing yourselves and sort of walking us through your journeys?
Sure. My name is Hanan Attiyan, and I live in Hunterdon County, and I am an elementary STEM teacher. I started my career as a third grade classroom teacher with a master's degree in instructional technology. That brought me into the technology integration realm. And from there, STEM landed in my lap, and I have never looked back. I am the recipient of a $60,000 CIA advanced technology grant from a few years back. And that helped me open our district's very first elementary STEM lab, which has really influenced the power of STEM in the elementary setting.
I'm Jennifer Donnelly. I am currently a AP Bio, Advanced Topics Bio, and Scientific Research teacher, which is my passion, at Jose Marti STEM Academy in Union City. I am lucky enough to be the County Teacher of the Year for Hudson County 23-24. I have won numerous awards and grants. I am blessed enough to be in a district where our superintendent has been on the forefront of STEM education. And my supervisor, Mrs. Nadia McCarr, has had 50 years in education. So she has been a leader in STEM for years, and she has been pushing STEM education. My classroom is a hub of STEM. We have a very, very robust scientific research program. So I am year-round doing scientific research program with my students. My students have been compete in local, state, and national and international scientific research competitions, which include Science Talent Search and ISEF. One of my students went to ISEF Los Angeles last year. I also have a student who discovered an exoplanet in my classroom, who is going to graduate from Caltech this year. He is works for NASA part-time. So I'm very proud of my students, but I am most proud of the fact that I love what I do, and that I have a great relationship with Hanan, and the two of us work very hard to be able to hand off to the next generation of students the love of STEM that we both have.
That sounds amazing. I was just wondering, could you guys talk more about Jersey Can and sort of what initiatives you're working with, either you've worked on in the past, currently working on, or planning to work on in the future?
Yeah, so Jersey Can is an education advocacy group which selects 12 teacher leaders and 12 parent leaders yearly to partake in advocacy in education. And they have themselves, as an organization, passed some pretty strong bills to change the landscape of education here in New Jersey. Jennifer and I, in particular, we want to tackle advocacy in STEM and in regards to not only STEM workforce retention, getting good STEM teachers to stay in the classroom, but in addition to that, just highlighting STEM in general and making sure that there's funding available to continue STEM projects from our youngest learners all the way to our older learners in high school so that they can ultimately pursue those jobs we know are coming in the future in for STEM in New Jersey.
I
We
think
also want to make sure that educators, particularly in K through 3, get training that they need to foster the love of science in the younger grades, which is when children really develop their love of science. And we feel that elementary teachers are not getting the proper training that they deserve in order to foster that love of training. So we're trying to get support for elementary teachers in particular for STEM, because New Jersey is the #1 state in the United States for education. And we want to continue to be the #1 state in the union for education going forward.
I see. I think both of you also mentioned receiving grants. I was just wondering, what's the like the process sort of like for applying for grants, and how does that sort of enable you to continue to provide STEM education for students?
Jennifer, I'll let you start with that one. You're big in grant reading and writing.
You have to be really good and make sure you keep your eyes on the internet and read, because there are tons of STEM grants out there, but you have to keep up with it. And the process is to find a grant. You have to read what they want in the grant, because grants are very specific in what they want. The New Jersey Department of Education puts out grants. I have written grants and I have read grants. And if you don't follow exactly what they want, that could keep you from getting a grant. There's corporate grants. Like I said, there's state grants, there's federal grants. The National Science Teachers Association puts out grants. So there's many different types of grants. So what you write, and they do have timelines that you have to really adhere to. But when I've been teaching a long time, I've been teaching 29 years. I can tell you, when I first started teaching, there were very, 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 very few grants for STEM. Okay. Back then, it was all a lot of sports, supportive sports. I have seen a big, big change. Now corporations are really, really supporting and pushing for STEM. So there's a lot of corporate grants out there. BASF, which had a huge presence in New Jersey, used to be really the first, and PSE&G were the first ones that really got in the game of grants. And I won a BASF SAF grant initially in the early 2000s. Also, I won a PSE&G grant early. But you have to be really good and savvy. And I'm going to give this to Hanan because she's an amazing grant writer. I was like, she's even better than I am. And I'm pretty savvy with it. But I have also won grants that are from things like Society for Science and the public. They have been around forever, and they give STEM grants. So you have to keep your eye out. But Hanan is amazing. So I'm going to give it off to her so she can talk to you about how to write an amazing grant, which we just won today.
I want to add to that by saying that grants are diverse in what they're asking for. Everything Jennifer just said was spot on. And right now, most any private grant that you're applying for, they want to give money for STEM. They're not looking for anything else. I have looked at hundreds of grants over the course of this past application cycle, and the trends are grants, sustainability, and innovation all really fall under the umbrella of STEM. But beyond that, you've got to be creative, because some grants ask for a video submission and you have to know how to put together a compelling video. Some grants ask for poster projects that your students create. So you've got to be able to get on the ground and convince classroom teachers to take away from their content time to create material for these grants. And some grants ask for you to just write or appeal for your story, but your story's got to be compelling. What's going to set you apart? Why should I give my money to you? And what will you do with that money to make this not a one and done, something that lasts and continues into the future, that we can see that we're really impacting the community at large?
One thing they are big into also is diversity and equity. They want to add that into the STEM because they want to see kids be able to see themselves in the grant So they will include that in what they're going to give you the money for STEM, right? Because they want to support companies have become very savvy in the fact that they know they're going to get a pipeline of well-educated, well-trained workforce for them. So that's why they support it, because like companies like Samsung, which New Jersey has Samsung, believe it or not, they had a huge corporate in Mahwah. I think it's closed down now. Honda, right? Honda, you think a car, why would a car, Subaru, why would car companies want to give a grant? They do. They want to give money, and they give substantial amount, $50,000. Okay. Yes, $20,000. But you, like Hanan said, you have to be savvy in the way you write your grant to get the money from them. And they're generous. That's a generous amount of money. So it's not just a company like Thermo Fisher that's willing to give you the money. It is corporations like I said, Honda and Samsung. But it's also Hanan won a substantial amount of money from the federal government. Her STEM lab is funded by the federal government.
Yeah. In fact, we even got grant money from Burlington, the store, the coat factory, right? They they noticed that they were opening a new store in our town, and they reached out to the nearest local school and said, "Hey, we'd like to adopt a classroom. We're opening a new store." And they granted us a substantial amount of money, and which helped us put the final touches on that STEM lab. I tell you, we wanted to buy the furniture, the couch that would the piece de resistance of this STEM lab, and that money came through. So, you can also just reach out to those local stores sometimes within your community, but it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of drive. So sometimes it's oftentimes more savvy to have a dedicated grant writer to make this their objective than to just depend upon your teacher workforce, who are so busy to begin with, to do it on the side or take time away from preparing lessons and getting ready for their day. So I would say that, it's time consuming.
I see. Thank you for the insight. Sort of to shift gears a little bit, I was wondering, I think this is more of a specific question to Mrs. Attiya, but like, what exactly motivated you and also what the experience was like to participate in the CIA Mission Possible Operation Advanced Technology competition?
Yeah, so if you think about it, in the past, our libraries were libraries. Now they're called media centers. And a media center can be all encompassing. And then if you think about it, in the past, there were computer labs, right? Places, rooms dedicated with computers all aligned in rows, all facing the front of the room to learn basic skills on computers. Those things are outdated now. So I thought, what could you do with an outdated computer lab that's typically somewhere near a library to make it an all-encompassing media center, a true 21st century media center? And to me, the answer to that is a STEM lab, a place where you can explore hands-on projects, learn STEM, and it doesn't have to be STEM in a silo. It's STEM in an interdisciplinary fashion, STEM with ELA, STEM with math, STEM with science, STEM with engineering, STEM with art, all of those things. And then oftentimes I encourage my students, after they've learned something in my particular lab or whatnot, they just hop right over to the library and discover books and more research and more information about it. So to me, it was an obvious choice to create a STEM lab that was associated with the media center at large, and hoping that others would see it and want to model the same.
I see. Speaking of the STEM lab, I was wondering what are technologies that you look forward or you would like to implement in the STEM lab, but also in both of your classrooms?
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer. I know you have some cool gadgets.
Wow. I would love to have a state-of-the-art lab. I mean, to be able to do stem cells. I mean, my real passion would be to have the stem cells, to be able to do state-of-the-art research in there, to have what they call a level 2 lab where I could do animal, studies with animals, which is attainable. because Bergen County Tech has that. So that's what I'm hoping for that we can do. That was what I'd like to do. We'll see. I'm hoping. That's what I would like. You know, every year we add another piece of equipment, or corporations are willing to donate equipment. So you go step by step. And like you said, we do grants that we can get money for to add that, but that's my dream. But I'm closer to retirement than Hanan is. So we'll see. We'll see. But and the biggest hard thing is that, you know, as we get this equipment and things, world is changing so quickly that as soon as you get these things, the world has taken another huge leap. So we have to be quick on the forefront, and we also have to think ahead, like what's going to be happening in like 2 or 3 years, because equipment gets outdated very quickly, as Hannah can say to you. So as soon as you get it in there, it might be outdated, right? I remember working with Legos in 2010 and doing Lego stuff. And like, it's like robotics, they don't even play with Lego really much anymore, right? And the robotic stuff some of it's outdated. So it's really a shame. And I have some sensors that I had bought like 4 years ago, and I'm not even going to use them anymore because the computer equipment is so much ahead. It's not even usable anymore. So that's one thing.
Yeah, I think it's key not to pigeonhole yourself into a certain kind of technology, which is kind of the beauty of having iPads and Chromebooks that students have one-to-one, and they can bring it into the STEM lab. So I'm not concerned with what model of device they're bringing in. For me, in an elementary STEM lab, we are still using Legos, maybe not Lego robotics, but to me, I'm using materials that have withstood the test of time, but can still be used for prototyping. Think about prototyping something with Legos and introducing that concept to students. Think about prototyping something with Play-Doh, and that, you know, Play-Doh and Legos have withstood the test of time. I've got lots of space in my STEM lab on purpose. I didn't want it cluttered with desks. I want my students sitting flexibly in any manner that allows them to be the most creative possible. And whether they're combining those tools that I just mentioned or adding more popsicle sticks, cardboard, all of that kind of stuff. I've also got a slew of 3D printers, which I think in an elementary setting is pretty unique. You know, they're still learning the basics, but nonetheless, I teach them what 3D printers are used for, what 3D printers can do, and what 3D printers will ultimately be used for in the future. So just leaving the elementary setting, knowing that, I think is huge. And then lastly, I look in my STEM lab, I have a production studio where students lead the morning news every single day. And that production studio, I mean, you can have somebody running the camera, somebody running the lighting, the host, the scripts, the practice reading in front of audience, the public speaking skills, the dissemination of the website links and all of that. There's just so much that is involved with a creative program of, you know, being on TV. And I think that's huge for elementary students. So there's just a lot of tinkering and things to do, but you can easily align them with the curriculum and make them a part of what the students are already required to learn.
See, that's what's great about elementary. You can allow the kids more freedom, and unfortunately, you know, as a high school student, you get into, you know, specifics in high school, right? You take AP Bio, you take chemistry, right? Now, when you talk about standing the test of time, teaching chemistry, right? It's been the same. I mean, I was in high school in the late 70s, right? It's been the same really since the test of time. I mean, when I was in college, I had the same textbooks my mom had in college in the 60s, right? They're just different editions. So there are standards that you really stick by, and some of the labs are still the same. I mean, I use some of the labs, it's just they're online, they're not on paper, like when I first started teaching. But also the technology, when you're teaching something like research, the technology changes and kids have different ideas. So, but like Hanan said, right? You have much more freedom in an elementary and a middle school than you do when you're teaching a specific thing in high school, right? I'm sure you've taken AP classes, right? You have specific labs that you have to do, and you have to change it up every year because the technologies come forward.
Speaking of labs and places to explore like students' creativity, why is like hands-on learning and real-world applications so crucial to a student's development in STEM?
You know what? There was an op-ed that just came out this week from another, what they call distinguished teacher. And he talked about why state testing can take away from the fact that our job as science teachers is to teach real world applications. And the greatest thing in a classroom is when kids go, Eureka, I can do this at home, or this is amazing, I've done this, right? Because that's what science is all about, right? The real applications. You have to teach kids this is science, right? And that they get these ideas and they go, oh, now I see that. I have an idea. I can solve this problem. This is applicable to such and such. The greatest thing as a science teacher for me is when a kid says to me, oh my gosh, you know what? You're teaching me this, but you can apply it to this, or I have an idea. That's what you want. You want kids to be inquisitive. You want kids to problem solve. You want kids to make an idea happen outside of your classroom that they can take into the real world, because we want kids to go out in the world and solve the world's problems. And I always say to people, you want to find out where the world's problems are and how to solve them, go talk to a 16-year-old.
And Angelina, I'm willing to bet that as you reflect on your entire educational journey now that you're a senior, I'm willing to bet that your most memorable learning experience was probably a hands-on experience, probably not the test you took that one Wednesday, right? So it speaks for itself, right? The long-term learning that occurred, the engagement, the level of engagement, and the memories that you formed based on that hands-on learning. And let's face it, the socialization aspect of it all, right? I can pop on my computer and ask artificial intelligence now to compute something for me, but I've lost socialization with my peers, understanding social cues within a group, understanding the dynamic of the roles of a group. Those are all really important for real world expectations.
I will say the one, because I'm in a, remember, I'm in a different generation. When I was a kid in high school, we had to sit there and all we did was copy notes off the board, study them, jam them in our head, and give them back to a teacher. I wasn't that kind of learner. I wasn't. I was the kind of learner that you are today. And that's what inspired me as a teacher. The freedoms that I have now to release the things that were inside of me as a 16 and 17-year-old makes me sing with joy as a teacher. I wish that could have happened for me. And I was stifled as a learner, stifled, because we weren't allowed to do those things. We had to sit there and just garble back what the teacher gave me. And it was horrible. It did not inspire people to do the great things that are happening today. And that's why I make my classroom the way it is. I don't give answers. I inspire kids to find answers.
That's wonderful. I can't believe there used to be no labs. Like, I can't imagine
There
how
were labs, but you had to do exactly what the teacher told you, calculate exactly what the teacher told you, and give it back to the teacher. And not at the end where there's questions say, like I had a question the other day. Mammals get fevers. Fevers kill viruses. Explain why you would need to have a fever when you're sick. That wasn't the kind of question I got. I never got those kind of questions. Never. And those are the questions where kids apply the things that they've learned. And you love to hear that. And then kids say, well, when I get sick, my fever goes really high, but and they would bring up things that have happened to them in their life. That's amazing. You want to hear that. And then kids go, well, when I had COVID, or when I was a little kid, I used to get really high fevers. And then you get to talk to them about why you would put an ice pack on their groin, or you would put an ice pack under their arms. And, these are great things that inspire great discussions with kids. That didn't happen when I was a kid. You just did what the teacher told you, gave the answer, and went on to the next thing.
And what Jennifer is saying is really valuable, even in the elementary setting. Neuroscience tells us that when we form a connection, right, an emotional attachment to what's being spoken about, something like, having that experience before, but not really connecting it to the content, now you're forming a connection and it's making a lot more sense to your learning.
I see. I guess this answer also sort of relates to the next question about your teaching philosophies, but I was just wondering how exactly do you try to achieve your teaching philosophies in the classroom and also how you plan to impact your students.
Go first, Hanan.
Yeah, my teaching philosophy is creativity. I want my students to be as creative as possible and think outside the box as much as possible. I want my students to be thinking about what they learned in school during those last few minutes before their eyes close to fall asleep at night. That to me is my teaching philosophy. I want to make it so engaging that they go home and they can't wait to find the first person to talk to about what they learned in school. So to me, it's very important to make an impression on the individual to the degree where they just can't stop thinking about knowledge.
My philosophy is nothing is impossible. And if you see it, you can be it. And so I make, as much as possible, I try to bring people into my classroom. I like to expose my students to everything. I give my kids experiences, and I tell them I'm a mentor. I'm not a teacher. I'm not the sage on the stage. In high school, you have to give up and lecture. I don't do that. I give my kids, if you come in my classroom, I'm not sitting there telling them what to do. I give them things and I tell them, show me what you know. So they explore. My classroom is more like if you're walking in an elementary classroom, you're coming in there and they're doing things. I guide them. I also provide them with opportunities for other people to come in. I do Zooms, whatever. But I tell them nothing is impossible. And if you see it, you can be it. And by giving them the opportunities, they explore what they want to do. And if they ask me something, I'm going to find the answer for them, or I'm going to help them find the answer, because helping them will make it that much more real for them. But giving it to them, it doesn't make it real for them, and it doesn't help them.
I see. Sort of on the same note, I was wondering, were there any particularly memorable success stories that you've had with your students?
Well, as I said, the student who discovered a planet in my room, I mean, I can't get any better than that. I mean, he is the reason that you can see from that telescope 2 years ago. He wrote the code for that. He made science history. I mean, he came from Morocco. His mother gave everything up in Morocco. They got the ability to come and get a visa. Okay. They got a visa to come. She gave it all up. They came here. There was someone they were supposed to be staying with. The person let them stay one night and set them out. They were homeless in New York, on the streets, sleeping in the subway and in pizzerias. She would clean pizzerias during the day to give them money. They finally I get very emotional. They finally made their way to Union City. They got to stay in a place with like 3 or 4 people. He used to lay as a young boy, 3, 4 years old, in the desert in Morocco and look up at the stars and say, there's other things there. Someday I'm going to find out what's there. Can you imagine? He gets to Union City in my classroom and he comes to me and he says, I think I'm going to find an exoplanet. I said, you want to? You do? He says, yeah, I think I did find an exoplanet. I said, you did? And I believed him. Other people didn't believe him. I believed him. He did. He found an exoplanet. He discovered it. He found its location. He found how it rotates, did all this work, and found out what it's made of in 3 years. People didn't believe him. I did. Now he's at Caltech. They pay him to go to school. NASA came knocking at his door in college. That is the real American dream. He's going to graduate with an astrophysics degree. MIT wants him for a PhD. Harvard wants him. Princeton wants him. I'm going to tell you, by the time he's 30, he's going to be a millionaire. That's what I want. This year, I had a student get into PLEMI, which only 50 kids in the entire world get into. I have a student who got into Vagalos at Penn. 20 kids in the world get into it. Those are the kind of stories you want to have. You want a kid that says, I have a dream and I want to do it. You got that dream and I'm going to help you. Right? As a teacher, it's not the money you make, it's the dreams that you make possible. And you help those kids.
Yeah. And really my success comes much later. To me, I envision that success, I'm passing on my students to Jennifer, right? I'm passing them on to middle school. I'm passing them on to high school, but I'm hopefully passing them on as individuals who see themselves in STEM. It doesn't mean every single student that passes through my classroom will want to be in STEM, but at least now they have the background to know what that means. And it's a broad umbrella, but it's beyond the scope of, I want to be a police officer, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a community helper, which is all great, right? But now we have students leaving fourth grade to go to fifth grade saying, I want to be a computer scientist. And that's huge.
And you have to give every teacher that's had a small part in kids credit. Like Hanan, if she didn't inspire those kids, they wouldn't come into the high school. Keep asking those questions, right? And the boy who discovered an exoplanet, he would always tell me about this fourth grade teacher. And I ended up having the daughter of that fourth grade teacher, and she loved science, right? And then I would hear about the seventh grade teacher. And I have a scientific research program in the summer. And do you know, I brought those teachers in to work in the scientific research program with those kids with me in the summer. And now we all work together. So you hear those great stories and you say, I'm so happy. And I would email those teachers. I email those teachers and I say, so-and-so told me how much they love your science class. And I don't think we do that enough to other teachers. Like if Hanan was in my district, I would email her and say, I want to tell you so-and-so told me today.
Yeah.
How much they love your science class. And I did. I brought another teacher in this summer who's going to work with me in the 8th grade. And I told her, your kids tell me all the time how much they loved your class. That's why we need to form a community and why we're doing the work that we're doing, Hanan and I, to let teachers know you are appreciated, you're loved, and the work that you did inspires kids.
I see. Sounds really heartwarming and amazing. And then, I was just wondering, like, from your experience, from what you've seen, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing classrooms right now?
I think our answers are similar. Our biggest challenges facing classrooms right now, to me, are twofold. First, it's budgetary constraints in the elementary field, right? In the elementary, we are, really focused on reading and math, as we should be, right? Students should know how to read and how to compute by the time they leave elementary. However, STEM does encompass those things. It's just, sometimes STEM is viewed as a silo of information. And so the funding allocations are not given to STEM. And it's probably the first subject that's cut, right? Like the first teacher to go if there were budget cuts, would be a STEM teacher because it's viewed as a niche position. But then outside of that, the second, it's actually two B's: budget and buy-in. Um, Classroom teachers have yet to fully buy into STEM. Some see it as a passing trend. Those of us who are in it know it's not. But there's also a fear of STEM, right? If I'm a classroom teacher that's specialized my entire career in reading, I'm afraid of STEM. I'm not sure, I'm not confident that I can teach it to its, fullest capacity. There's a lot of heavy lifting. I've got to prepare materials. I've also got to teach 6 other subjects. So it's a lot about buy-in, and then it's a lot about budgetary allotment.
Right. And it's also a lack, teachers feel that they're not appreciated. I can tell you the county teachers of the year are working really hard for recruitment and what they call retaining teachers. And burnout. COVID did a lot to really put teachers over the edge, I would say, right, Hanan? And then they just said, I can't anymore. And it really self-care. And I think that a lot of school districts administration is realizing and focusing on the fact that teachers need self-care. Teachers put a lot of time and effort into the love and passion that they have for education. And sometimes they forget about themselves. COVID was really hard on everybody. And I think that it made a lot of people look inward. And we're losing tons of teachers in every state of the union. But math and science teachers, they're just not there anymore. They're not. And it's a crisis, a real crisis. And what are you going to do when there's no math teacher to teach? What are we going to do? You can't put a kid in front of a computer to learn science. You just can't do it. You need the hands-on. You need someone there to doing a lab on a computer. Think about what COVID was like, right? You were in high school, freshman, weren't you, during COVID? Did you enjoy bio on the computer? No. So that's a real crisis. We have to do something about it. And do you know that in New Jersey, there's only 1,000 people in college to become teachers right now? I think it's 1,293 people. If you went 20 years ago, there was 8,000 people.
Yep.
For every person that leaves teaching, there's one person for the job. Back then, for every person who left teaching, there were 15 people who could take the job.
I didn't know the numbers were like that.
Yeah, it's pretty jarring.
Isn't that sad? So we're trying to do something about it, but we need to remember that that's going to be a problem if that number goes to 0. I can say as a high school teacher and knowing this, there are sometimes no applicants for physics jobs. 0 applicants.
That's a lot to take in. I honestly had no clue it was like that. It's just our teachers just kept leaving, and I was just like,
Because
oh,
you work for a great district, but places like Newark, Camden, Trenton get no applicants. Jersey City, Newark, they get no applicants for science jobs. They get no applicants for math jobs. What do you do? So it's a problem, especially when you can make a ton of money going into computers or into biotech or right.
Or becoming a YouTube influencer.
Well, TikTok until it disappears. So,
I see. Mm. And then sort of to shift gears, I was wondering if either of you had any advice for current educators who are looking to either expand opportunities or students who are looking for that support.
go to your teacher, talk to your teacher. They know a lot. They can
But
help
in
you.
addition to that, good STEM resolves a lot of those underlying issues that even Jennifer was just talking about. Good STEM might alleviate your chronic absenteeism in your class, in your school, excuse me. Good STEM will give those students motivation to get up and come to school. And good STEM will provide opportunities for New Jersey workforce. So by allowing STEM into your space, you're also, kind of resolving those underlying issues that we are facing in education, whether it is teacher retention or chronic absenteeism or opportunities, equitable opportunities for marginalized students. Good STEM will really help with that.
Right? She's right. I have a great school, right? I work with the best of the best, right? My kids go to great colleges and they're underserved. I'm in an underserved district, right? They don't want to be absent. My kids they're sitting in the classroom with sick. Some of my kids, I'm like, stay home, you're sick. No, 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 I have to come to school. They're afraid to be absent. And she's right. They don't want to miss a thing. Even in COVID, I was on every day to the point where I had to have an eye operation. Okay. So she's right. They don't want to miss a thing.
I feel like coming from a pretty privileged community with like some of the like really good STEM teachers, like I can't imagine just like our entire STEM program being wiped out. I feel like that would probably like discourage me from going to school because yeah, I just can't imagine that.
Sometimes the kids that act up the most are the
Yeah.
kids who want to be stimulated. And some teachers who are young don't understand that, just think they're bad kids. They're not. They're the kids with the greatest ideas. You just haven't been able to stimulate them to get the ideas out of them. But teachers like that, Hanan and I, for years, we get that. But unfortunately, they're in schools where they can't get those teachers, those great STEM teachers, to come in there and inspire them. So they end up chronically absent, or they're chronically,
In the office.
in the office with the principal, or they're suspended, or there's other things that are worse. And that's sad. It's sad because those are the kids you can inspire to do great things. Or if you ever listen sometimes to people when they're on TV and they started their own company and you really listen to some of them, like Damon John, who was on Shark Tank, listen to his story. He was bad. He was a bad kid in school. And he will tell you because I
You're
didn't have,
right.
yeah,
You're very,
have the
he's
teacher.
very right. I have also picked up on that pattern of really successful CEO types, and they will oftentimes say that they were hyperactive in school and extremely hyperactive.
I have a student whose father, who I don't want to say is a famous comedian, and brilliant, brilliant. And I told him this, and he went to school in Philadelphia in the inner city. He acted up and was always in trouble. And I looked at him and I said, you were the bad kid who was in trouble. He goes, yeah. He goes, because nobody cared enough to take the time. He is, I don't want to give too much away about him. Nobody cared. He ended up a comedian because he couldn't get to the point where he deserved to be, which is he should be a scientist right now. Okay. So it's the truth. No one was able to give the opportunity to the kids because they didn't have the teachers that could inspire them in STEM and math. And it's the C people that run the world. It's the C people. Bill Gates, C's. Steve Jobs got thrown out of Stanford for not going to class and being a C student. So again, like Hanan said, the hyperactive people who just did not get inspired, and they're running the biggest companies in the world.
I see. And then sort of to end off, I was wondering how, like with the AI trends and stuff like that, how do you see that sort of impacting your classrooms? But also, where do you see STEM education or like your classroom maybe 5 years or 10 years from now?
I see AI as a tool to not be fearful of. I know that when new tools come out into society, whatever tools they are in the course of our history, there's an element of fear. I look at it as a tool to inspire more creativity. So now perhaps the computational aspect or the attainment of the information part might be done for me, but I still need to know how to critique it, correct? But then what I do with that can only be done by human hands. That level of creativity, creation, and innovation. I mean, we created AI, so we can create other things too. So I look at it as ultimately a tool for my teaching, a tool for student learning, but then I want to see students do more with it. What that more is ever evolving, but at the same time, humans have the element of creativity and having hands and moving those hands. So I'm not fearful of it at all. I only see it as a new age of learning.
Two jobs that will still be around and are still needed: teacher and scientist. And that Hanan said the creative portion cannot be done by AI.
And you've seen that, I'm sure, in your use of AI. There's this like level of creativity that is missing that perhaps the AI gives you the catalyst, the ability to break your writer's block, to break your creative block that you might be having. But once you get those little nuggets and you're a truly innovative learner or seeker of information, you take off with that.
Intellectual property cannot be replaced by a machine. The ideas to make the world better cannot be done by a machine, right? The inspiration to understand how to use this as a young child cannot come from a machine. To harness the power of this cannot come from a machine, right? So AI, like Hanan said, it's a tool, but it's never going to replace a human being and the presence of a human being to mold and to create. So 5 years from now, I would still be where I am. 10 years from now, I'm going to be retired, but I would still be where I am in the classroom. Scientists will still be in the lab.
I had a kindergartner say to me today as we were learning about social robotics, oh, well, I would love a robot that could come and clean my house. And I thought that's probably very viable to happen in the next 5 years. A full-fledged human-looking robot cleaning your house. And that's great. I'll channel my energy elsewhere. It's just going to be a different type of world, but it's not, we just have to accept it.
People are, I remember when computers came in the classroom. I don't know if you were in teaching then, Hanan. I remember people were terrified of laptops. And I had one of the first laptop classrooms, terrified. They were going to get rid of our jobs. We were going to be gone and whatever. Look where we are today. We're not teaching, our jobs aren't gone. It enhanced our teaching, right?
And similarly, I was in my first year of teaching when smart boards were introduced.
Oh, yeah.
And I was chosen to pilot the first smart board in my classroom, and it was pure pandemonium. And now you walk into a classroom and you can't even find the whiteboard or the chalkboard. It's just projector, screen, and you interact with the screen.
I'm old enough to be the person that was writing on a chalkboard every day and came home with chalk all over my pants. So, and I remember you can't find chalkboard. You can't even find a whiteboard, but she's right. Okay. And I was the one that wrote on the chalkboard. And let me tell you, it took a long time and erasing, right? So look where we are today. You can't do teaching without a computer. You're lost. If the computer goes down, the whole day ceases. Not for me, because I can pull out a worksheet that I still have. And everybody else is like, oh, I can't teach. I can. I can. But some of the other teachers are lost. They don't know what to do. That just shows you the difference, right? In the technologies. And the old lady who goes, I have a worksheet. I can go get it in my filing cabinet. And the young teacher laughs. She's like, what are these papers you have in here? I'm like, I'm not throwing them out, girl. I'm still keeping them. They're from 1997 and 1996. And she laughs. And I show her, these are worksheets I made by myself. Look, this is even before Word was really good. So I am that old that I was in school before the calculator was invented.
Whoa.
And whiteout.
Oh, good old whiteout.
So we can end on that.
Yeah, I do think that's a pretty good place to end. Thank you so much once again for coming today and speaking with me. It was really insightful, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Yeah, good luck to you, Angela.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.